without further ado, continuing on with our session for today. Ladies and gentlemen, we are proceeding to our next agenda. So, this is the session number 3, Agriculture, Biotechnology Catering for the World. And introducing once again to your amazing moderator, which I have just given a bit of glimpse earlier on today. So, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Namita, she was instrumental in launching several green and sustainable wholesale and retail financial products and has contributed to raising over $1 billion as capital and credit lines. Under her able guidance, the first ever green bond of India was issued in 2015, an accreditation award from GCF. She has founded Octus ESG in 2020, a global expert advisory on sustainable finance and ESG, which was awarded India's SME Leadership Champion by UN Women 2021 Asia Pacific WEP. So, Namita was ranked one of the leading women in business sustainability by WBCSD and globally recognized as Sustainability Leader of the Year by Ethical Corporation UK 2017. So that's our moderator. Now, moving on to the panelists for today. We have Mr. Crispino Lobo, Managing Trustee, WOTR, and Executive Director of Sampada Trust. So, Crispino Lobo has over 30 years of engagement in tackling water challenges, environmental degradation, and the impacts of climate change and on agriculture and livelihoods in rain-fed and dryland regions in India and internationally. So he has co-founded 4 non-profits which collectively have impacted the lives of over 4.3 million people in 9 states in India, trained over 530,000 people from 27 states and 63 countries, and supported development works in over 5,200 villages. And he was the program coordinator of the large-scale and successful bilateral Indo-German watershed development program in Maharashtra, and has been a member of several advisory committees to government at both the state and federal levels. And he has contributed to setting up 2 large national level funds to promote watershed development and climate change adaptation in the country, and has authored and co-authored 8 books and several articles, and currently he serves as member of the multi-stakeholder platform on water government set up by the government of Maharashtra. Next up, we have Ms. Khadijah Iskandar, the Acting Chief Executive Officer of Agrobank Malaysia, and she has more than 20 years of experience in the financial services in both local and international setup, as well as conventional and Islamic banking environment. Her past experience includes setting up of new Islamic banks for local and foreign shareholders, and her experience and knowledge in banking in general allowed her to contribute to development of human capital in Islamic banking by being an accredited IBFIM trainer. And her specialized subject matters are Islamic corporate banking products and structuring and risk management. She was also an examination committee member of Certified Islamic Financing Professional CIFP under the purview of IBFIM. So next up, we have Shri CSR Murthy, the Chief General Manager of Farm Sector Development Department of NABARD. So Shri joined NABARD in 1988 as a technical specialist in horticulture and plantation sector. He has contributed to promotion of organic cultivation for the Goals program, and he has undertaken many consultancy assignments on agri value chains in India. He has worked in various regional offices of NABARD, viz. Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Pune, Telangana, and at the head office, Mumbai itself. So he has worked with United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, in the thematic area of cluster development program in India in 2002. So applying industrial cluster development principles to agro-processing in rural areas, Shri is the Chief General Manager of Farm Sector Development and Department of NABARD. He has traveled widely to share his expertise and experience with Africa and also GIV, the Ivory Coast of cashew processing, and Israel on high-tech agriculture. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I will now hand over this session right here, the discussion session, to the moderator, Ms. Namita Vikas.
Thank you very much, and good morning and a very warm welcome to everybody joining in today for the Global DFI's Forum 2021 Malaysia. It is indeed a pleasure to be here, and a very special welcome to all our panelists for today. Well, during the recent COP26, we saw that 27 countries signed the Sustainable Agriculture Policy Action Agenda for Transition to Sustainable Agriculture, and second, the Global Action Agenda for Innovation in Agriculture. As a part of all of this agenda, countries laid down new commitments. One, to change their agricultural policies to become more sustainable. Two, to ensure that there's less pollution. Three, to invest in the science required for the sustainable agriculture. And four, to protect food supplies against climate change. I believe this is a very important advancement, considering that the agriculture sector is so very critical part of any economy, and more so for developing countries like ours. A recent OECD FAO report shows that productivity improvements will be key to feeding the growing global population, which is projected to reach, of course, about 8.5 billion by 2030 with sustainability. And to be able to make these productivity improvements, I think applying agriculture technology holds tremendous possibilities for the developing world. The use of high yielding, disease and pest resistant crops would have a direct bearing on the improved food security, poverty elevation, and environmental conservation. Agriculture biotechnology has seemed to be emerging as a major enabler as it helps produce more yield on less land. This undoubtedly increases the overall productivity and offers developing countries means to sustain themselves and reduce worldwide hunger. The positive news here is that worldwide governments are indicating a forward movement with reforms of the regulatory system, and the growing of new varieties of crops and rearing of stock using gene editing or other new breeding techniques are seen as a step in the right direction. Of course, upskilling and upscaling biotech, agri-biotech initiatives needs more attention, and this is driven by strengthening research infrastructure by generating knowledge at one level, technology product development for enhanced productivity at another level, and of course, nutritional fortification and improved quality parameters along with a biotic or biotic stress tolerance, input use efficiency, climate resilience, and biosafety. All this coming together would really strengthen the space. And then capacity building of farmers through regular training programs is also very critical. Assisting farmers for getting benefited by different government schemes related to agriculture and horticulture would enable them to work in this direction. And another important institutional mechanism to organize small and marginal farmers and to enable the uptake of agri-biotech is through farmer producer organizations. We have seen how they have been able to provide end-to-end support and services to small farmers and cover technical services, marketing, processing, and other aspects of cultivation inputs. The premise behind, of course, FPOs, as we all know, is that aggregation can overcome the constraint of small size and enhance the entire farm to fork model. While FPOs as facilitators do exist, I think enhancing their role and improvements and support is very, very important, as they're riddled by many challenges often, which include lack of technical skills, inadequate professional management, weak financials, lack of risk mitigation mechanisms, and inadequate access to credit, market, and infrastructure. In addition to this, I think the other moving technologies like climate smart agriculture serve as a big boost to the sector. With larger goals of addressing climate change and food security, climate smart agri not only adopts a landscape approach, but builds upon the basic principles of sustainable agriculture and goes beyond the sectoral approaches and uses an integrated approach in planning and management kind of a goal, right? So this really entails bringing multi-stakeholders together like scientists, farmers, food manufacturers, policymakers in an inclusive approach at a local, regional, and a national level that will enable decision-making about land use and agricultural practices. And I think it is very important, given that gender equality and the social inclusion, this kind of an approach also engages women and marginalized communities as a part of the processes. All in all, I believe that these practices have an incredible opportunity. And the session ahead of us would discuss in detail and showcase how organizations are using Agri biotech to overcome on-ground challenges and bring in an inclusive approach to cater to this world. So as we heard that we have with us today, Mr. C.S. Murthy, the Chief General Manager of the farm sector of NABARD, which is the largest DFI in India lending to the agri sector. Then we have Mr. Crispino Lobo, who is a co-founder and managing trustee of WOTR. They are a large NGO which is serving farmers and enabling farmers on ground. And Ms. Khadijah Iskandar, the Chief Executive Officer of Agrobank, which specializes in Islamic banking. So welcome everybody, and we would go to Mr. Murthy. He has a brief presentation and we will follow that up with questions. So over to you, Mr. Murthy.
Good morning. Am I clear? Good morning, Namita and my distinguished panelists. You have set the right tone and you have given a lot of background that it serves me very easy. In terms of recently we have seen IPCC AR6 report, which I would not go to detail elaborate it. It's a code red for humanity. It's no more a climate change looming large. It is going to be a kind of an emergency. Then we had a COP26 where all countries have deliberated, very intense technical discussions we had. And of course, various countries have given their viewpoints at the COP26. I appreciate this is a seminar. I mean, this is kind of a workshop which we had is very timely in the sense that I'm talking about the biotechnology, which is primarily is a domain of scientists. In fact, Nobel Prize winner. I mean, last time 2020 for chemistry, Nobel Prize for chemistry has been gone to the gene editing. So this is purely subject of academicians. But today my presentation is this: how in the context of climate change, how the frontier technologies, innovation in agriculture, in the realm of biotechnology, how a developmental bankers would look at these things. I would be putting the lens of lender's angle, DFS perspective on this very important topic, which is very technical subject. Next, this one, the thing has already been said. How we will look at the lot of biotechnological innovations that are happening around. There are a lot of molecular biotechnological tools have been evolved. Like for example, you have a very deep genetic maps, then a molecular marker gene breeding techniques, so on and so forth. But the important thing is this: there is some adjacent to this one, adjacent to this kind of a new technology. There is one which is the speed breeding technology, which has been evolving. I would like to understand the speed breeding, which is very important to the developmental bankers. You know, conventional breeding has this rich situation. It has got a long cycle, 8 to 10 years to release any variety. With the help of a speed breeding, we can greatly shorten variety releases. For example, a wheat, which will now, if you want to evolve a variety which is a climate resilient one, it takes 8 to 10 years. But if you go for a speed breeding, the scientists say that now it's possible to have 6 cycles in a year. The important point of this one is this: most of the open pollinate varieties, which are in the domain of public domain, where farmers, which are being used by the farmers. So the speed breeding techniques would enable enable farmers to replace their varieties with improved varieties. This is the kind of a thing which we are going. So it has a huge, large volumes and a low margin business where private sector might not show the interest, but public sector definitely has a big role to play space. Then we come back to the tissue culture. I think tissue culture is the one where it's a very interesting story for bankers as a whole. It's a quite successful story. Example, I will take an example of banana. Banana tissue culture was upon a time. No, it was we require varieties which are a short duration, then disease resistance, and with the advent of tissue culture, we got a varieties. One variety is called Cavendish Grandin variety, which has been mostly popularized through tissue culture protocol. As a result of which now we have a very short duration crop cycle, then pest disease free, then it's a climate resilient as well, that in the sense that it's a very short stem, even if gales will come, cyclones will come, it's able to have a quick recovery. So this is a very outstanding example of in India, of course, in the world as well. But the point which we would like to make to all our bankers is this: we are not reading the tissue culture alone. I mean, the bankers are always would be interested to know the credit multiplier. Suppose if I give an investment in a tissue culture lab, how it is going to multiply my credit. That's how we look at it. For example, if you have a tissue culture plant, then immediately agronomical practices follow, precision farming follows, drip irrigation follows, then fertigation follows, then mulching follows. Then you have the post-harvest investments, cold storage. So that means the entire, at least 5 to 6 times of a credit portfolio we would like to see. That's what we are witnessing in India. Another one interesting example is date palm. Date palm is basically a desert, and it's grown in India as well as in the desert regions of the world. But date palm, one very unique contribution of tissue culture is this: the profitability. I'll put it in very simpler terms. The profitability of date palm purely depends upon the sex ratio. It has a 50% of male, 50% of female flowers. That means if through tissue culture we have addressed this issue of flowering, that means imagine if you look at the number. I'm not going to the science side. If you increase the female flowers to 100%, theoretically possible, then profits would be doubled. It is as simple as this. So this is a kind of a technology which is going on. Probably in India, we see this technology is developed by research institutes, agriculture universities, and going to the farmers in desert region. And this is a kind of a great adaptation, kind of a technology which has been evolved. Then another one is bamboo. You talked about both. We require an adaptation and mitigation strategy as well. I look at the bamboo side. Bamboo, there is one species which we have come across in India. It's a bamboo balkova. That's a variety which is very fastest growing plant. It has a huge carbon sequestration potential. It means 300 kg of oxygen it will release, and 80 kg of carbon dioxide will sequester per acre. And tissue culture, and bamboo flowers means it will have. But if you grow with the tissue culture technique, it's a perennial and it's a sterile plant, and it grows continuously throughout the year. So, and in fact, I would like to say, in one of the universities, bamboo plants is taken as oxygen park. Now, forestry has been a big strategy for all of the countries, and in India as well, we got a bamboo mission is there. So we have the trade-linked subsidy schemes to promote bamboo. Then another one is floriculture aspect. The growth story is known. Floriculture basically now no more a domain of private companies. Now with the advent of technologies like polyhouses and polyhouses, drip irrigation techniques, now it's becoming a very small marginal farmers investments. This is the thing which is happening with the case of small marginal farmers. Is a huge adaptation technique being followed throughout India, and sugarcane. So huge potential is there in this tissue culture field. So we look at is presently growing at 15%. Probably there would be greater science would be evolved for all those commercial crops like mango, grapes, so on and so forth. So we'd like to see great growth potential, great to potential in the sectors in science, as well as the potential to lend also. Then another one is the sector that biofertilizer, biopesticide segment. It is again, it's ideal kind of a project. It's a kind of a low segment to mid segment kind of a projects where agriculture graduates or science graduates would take up this kind of application. Now with the increasing usage of integrated pest management, integrated nutrient management practices to reduce the pesticide usage, this is witnessing a huge change, is increasing usage, and it's getting attraction from the banker side also. We got a dedicated schemes to promote this biofertilizer, biopesticide as well. BT cotton, you know very well. BT cotton is a growth story. 2002 it was introduced. Now it's the only one crop which has been allowed by our government for commercial cultivation. Now it is other crops are in the line and requires the government of India regularly approvals. Then gene editing, you already talked about the gene editing tool. Imagine the kind of a thing it helps us. For example, if you take a tomato crop, if through gene editing, if you're going to silence the gene, which which silences the ripening agent or which reduces ethylene gas, which is a hormone for the ripening. So it's going to be a huge differences in the post-harvest investments and the post-harvest losses. India has got a staggering post-harvest losses. So these are the technologies which we are going to see through gene editing tools. Then genome sequence is also happening. China is reading it, where India, many of the countries are the partners of genome sequence. It is a basic science which helps us to understand the entire gene sequences, and it helps us in breeding techniques. Then we got a PCR diagnostic tool. For example, how it's very important to the banker. For example, we have lended to the aquaculture. Then virus attack is there. We lost the investments on this attack. Then kind of a moratorium. Then there are ways and means of doing. Now they got a diagnostic tools are there, which we're able to diagnose the viral diseases. So there are a lot of commercial applications which are happening in this entire sector. We see a biotechnology is in a kind of an interface between agriculture and environment, and with the changes with the imperatives which we have right now. The biotechnology, we are going to see huge attraction, especially for the bankers. That's how we view it. Then question is arises. Then there are technologies available at research institutes with agriculture universities. The important thing which you flagged it, Namita, you flagged it rightly. How do you take these technologies to the farmers, especially to the small marginal farmers? This requires typically DFAs have got a responsibility not only refinancing functions or the supervisory regulatory functions. We have the mandate of developmental function typically carry, and our balance sheets is not determined by the size and sheer numbers, but we are going to be evaluated by what kind of impact we are going to be create with small marginal farmers. That is how we impact-based lending role DFAs normally would take it. As usual, NABARD being a premier DFA in India, this is the job we have taken it. Thing is this, being a DFA, still we have got a pan-India presence. You look at we operate through regional offices, that DDMs are posted there, there are our ambassadors. Then we got a specialized subsidies that you rightly pointed out just now. That you talked about FPO, you talked about the constraints. But question is the very important constraints coming in the way credit. Banker would put their own due diligence, credit, rigor, so on and so forth. So therefore, being a DFA, we got a subsidiary, Napisana is there, who is playing a huge role in filling this credit gap. And of course, through credit guarantees also being given by our own other subsidiaries. Then partners, that we have got a partnership. We have 3,000 partners. I think Mr. Christian Lobo is there. We have partnered with Indo-German Watershed Development Program. We were the partners. We evolved together. We learned the lessons, and the kind of numbers which we are reeling out. Probably Mr. Crispino probably would be reviewing 19 days. Now this is kind of from simple Maharashtra, Amarnagar. We moved on to the partnerships. You see 3,000 members, warrant aggregation, farmers clubs, and 5,000 farmer producer organization, millions of SHGs. But question is this: what we look at this, you require a kind of a overlaying. We have a watershed development programs, stable development programs. Probably these kind of technologies which have been evolved. For example, date palm, already I said it will be palm grade. Several examples are there which we will overlay. Already investment has been created, social capital has been created, natural resources has been strengthened. Probably with these technologies we would like to overlay it. Then being a development bankers for climate change, smart agriculture, we are also NAE for Adaptation Fund, and NFCC, National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change, Government of India, and GCF, we are direct access for GCF, and we are 2 GCF projects are there, and Adaptation Fund also we have got several kind of projects, and in all 38, 275 million. But the question is 275 million, as you rightly pointed out, we require a huge adaptation of finance. Adaptation is the thing, and the kind of programs which we are talking about is a nature-based solutions where the focus is on the mitigation side, probably adaptation side. With this kind of a program, we would like to see scale up and gets attention of the governments. And we got a small farm sector promotion fund, it's all soft side. Whatever the technology say, climate smart agriculture available with the regional research stations. I think with this, through this fund, we are able to support. Please believe this, today or every day, one or other kind of a workshop on agriculture, on thought process. This is the kind of engagement we have with our communities, with our partners, it is a kind of a learning, it's a daily for us, it's a learning curve. So that's how we are at. And regarding the biotechnology, I come back to kind of regulations we are in place. First thing is this RBI, we are guided by the priority sector lending guidelines given by our Reserve Bank of India. It is our central banker. Agri biotechnology finds a place, and for PSL, 100 crores in terms of billion USD, it's 13.3, where bankers have been, they have to, they recognize as the PSL target. It's a huge money. It's indeed, this kind of a broad policy enables the bankers to lend their money to meet their priority sector stipulations. The question is this: how do you take it out? How do you educate the bankers? Tell there's a great potential in their particular district, in their block, in the region. So this is transmitted to district potential legal credit plans, where component of Agri biotechnology, we assess the credit potential based on the developments which are happening is there. So we project it. So at least banker would have a look at how many tissue culture labs is possible, how many biofertilizers are possible, what kind of credit can go, where to go, which segment is to go. At least it gets reviewed at the district level. Such kind of a granular it goes. And of course, tissue culture, as you said, that it's one of the trust areas for refinance support. And that means we give 95% as a normal percentage of 90%. This is a 5% is the kind of incentive to differentiate, to discern the trust areas vis-a-vis business as usual activities. Then we got a subsidy channeling agencies. We require biofertilizer, biopesticides. Bankers do require subsidies to enable the debt equity ratios to have a moderate their DSCRs for the beneficiaries. So we provide, Government of India provides subsidy, and it will be routed through us, so that the subsidy will be credited to the banker's account. It's a very kind of a smooth kind of a transmissions. Of course, subject to availability of budgets with the government, this always goes. Then we got a development, R&D is there, applied research is there. We got a lot of studies. We do impact studies on various things. Probably would see a lot of studies we have done. Then one more thing is this NAB Ventures. I said that one more. It is our one of the subsidies. It is on the venture side, on the capital, venture capital support, and we got a partnership with BARAC. It's a public limited company promoted by the DBT, where we are mandated to invest this fund, which is available from BARAC, suitably blended with our own finances, our own money, plus money spent in other DFS like LIC. We are lending to the agriculture and the biotechnology segment. Then tissue culture, I said that it's a pretty usual. It's very normal for us. It has been gone to the bankers. We got a scheme for this, where Mission for Integrated Development of Horticulture, where you give a lot of subsidies. So it is a kind of a lot of attraction because of this back-end credit linked subsidy scheme. So it's enabling the farmers, enable the bankers to fund this activity. Then FPOs has been set. We are geared up now. It's set. Of course, this we have got 5,000. We got a dedicated funds. Plus, we have been one of the implementing agencies for formation and promotion of 10,000 FPOs in the country. Probably for the biotechnology front, we would be looking at, we make FPOs as the technologically resilient FPOs. So that and moreover, FPO, it operates the scale. But you have a tissue culture lab, it requires a scale of operation. Probably we will be looking at FPO not only in the destination of the extension services. Probably would be able to get the capital support of the government. Then we have the being an apex institution, we have got linkages. It's a dialogue on with one or other kind of a thing with our Indian Council of Agriculture Research, then our Export Authority, EPIDA, then several national institutions, including DBT, state agricultural universities, and Kushvik again. Of course, what I said that we do learn from our partners like WOTR and many premier institutions where they have pioneered the several NRM-based techniques. This is how we are at. And one more last statement is this. Please believe this for all of us at the DFA segment. This is a message we would like to convey. Agriculture, don't blame that agriculture is giving a 31% emissions. Our animals are now giving a methane. You require a lot of these things. But please believe this, with the kind of a technological advancement, we believe strongly agriculture is part of the solution to the climate change. So we don't look at the problem of the climate change. That's how we are looking at it. We are quite optimistic, and this is how we are positive about the sector as a whole. And I thank the panelists for allowing me for this presentation, and also I thank ADFM and Mr. Mohammad Prasad Anif to give this opportunity to present it in this very important, timely meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murthy. I think you've made some very, very interesting points this morning, right from techniques that have been applied to create, the opportunity for large volume at lower costs. I think one of the most important points that you made was, and especially for financiers or bankers, is how do you link profits to investing into biotechnology or agri-biotechnology? I think, because bankers look at a risk and return kind of an approach, I think this is a very important point. And the overall holistic approach to lending that NABARD is bringing together, where, you're looking at subsidy facilitation, R&D, venture capital support. I think all of this has come together really very nicely. I think one important point that you made, and which when we speak about E, S, and G, I think one of the important points is G is how do you evaluate the bank, not just by the balance sheet, but as per the impact that is being created. I think that's a very, very important point that you have made from the G aspect of ESG, which NABARD is looking at. And thank you very much. And we'll come back to you with more questions. If I may now move on to Crispino. Crispino, you have been in this space for the last 25, 27 years, and now biotechnology in agriculture focuses on development of improved crop varieties. We've seen NABARD's presentation in terms of yield, better adaptability to abiotic stress, and improved nutritional parameters. Mr. Murthy explained all of their perspective very well. But your extensive experience in agricultural activities, please, we would like to know from you, what are some of the innovative, successful agri-biotech solutions on the ground that have enabled or that have the potential to enable exponential scale and impact multi-developmental parameters? Over to you, Crispino. Crispino, you need to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Namita. Let me quickly take a step back and try and situate the current parameters of existing conditions in agriculture, at least in developing countries. I'm of course sharing largely my experience in India, but it's fairly representative of many developing countries all over the world. You see, agriculture today is confronted with many challenges. One of them is, of course, climate change. The other is biodiversity loss. Recently, because of the COVID pandemic, there's been a serious disruption in both productivity and supply chains and markets. Secondly, unfortunately, the burden placed on agriculture is also to meet the livelihoods and income needs of the vast majority of people in the country. In India, for instance, as much as 58% of people depend directly and indirectly on agriculture. So there's enormous strain put on a very basic sector, actually, primary sector. And therefore, it's expected to also address the agrarian crisis, the distress in rural areas, as well as the fact is that the agricultural packages and practices of the past, notably that went under the broad catch-all title of Green Revolution technologies, has in many places now peaked, you see, and resulting now not only in decline in yields, but also in terms of degradation of natural resources. So within this context, agriculture doesn't present a very rosy or very encouraging scenario. It's quite depressing at times. However, of late, there have been three major shifts that are occurring, some of which is obvious and some of which is the results of which will be made evident in the days ahead. In fact, some of these developments Mr. Murthy alluded to, and so I will come to that later because he has very well clearly and in detail spelled them out. One of the great realizations that has resurfaced, which we always knew but took the backseat for a long time, is agriculture depends upon ecosystem services. It is a function of nature. For a long time, we thought that technology was a solution, and it made sense in a time when, at one time in the 19th century, for instance, an early part of the 20th century, the world was faced with hunger in many places over several periods of time. And so the miracle that technology, mechanization, new developments in practices and application of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, etc., brought about a revolution in agriculture productivity. And of course, changed lives and fortunes of many countries. But all of it was based on resource exploitation. You see, we extracted to produce and did not think about regenerating or replacing what we took over, from which we extracted our resources. And this realization that you cannot have agriculture anymore either productive, commercially profitable, as well as sustainable if you adopt a resource extraction approach to it. So this idea that unless you also improve, conserve, protect, and stabilize natural resources, primarily land, water, and biodiversity, and the ecosystems in which people live in, you will not be able to have sustainable agriculture, which also meets the needs of raising incomes of people, as well as improving the quality of and well-being of people. That's, I think, is a very important thing, and it's not to be underestimated. Because if one of the things that we have learned from extractive agriculture, resource-intensive agriculture, is that it consumes a very base on which it is built. It's like a carpenter, it's like a tree cutter cutting the branch on which he's standing. You're going to fall, you see. And so this improvement for this things that and so people are now looking at regenerating watersheds, landscapes, and the entire ecosystems in which the entire context of agriculture is done, in which it's implemented. Secondly, they're focusing now on improving soil health. Soil health we've neglected for a long time. We only saw it as a base in which you can root a plant and in which you can dump nutrients to ensure plant growth. But now we realize it is the base of life. Not only can it help us to improve productivity, but also it acts as a store for carbon, you see, as well as for improving the quality of production itself and the quality of nutrition and food that we produce. And so we're moving now to more what is called regenerative agriculture, agroecology, agriculture that focuses on nature-based solutions, which are nature positive and at least nature neutral. And lastly, a lot of technologies coming in which increase factor use productivity, as well as also with as low a possible environmental impact. Now you see, practically what does this mean? You see, when we work in the watershed organization Trust Water in partnership with NABARD and other institutions, we work in areas which are rain-fed, so they don't have assured irrigation. And as you know, water is a very critical element to improving productivity of agriculture. But what do you do in rain-fed farming systems? You then organize communities to harvest rain whenever it falls across the catchments and the landscapes in which people live, across the watersheds in which they live, and across the ecosystems in which they live. The idea and the mantra is water that is running down the hill slopes, you make it slow down. Water that is slowed down, you make it walk. And walking water, you stop it and force it underground. So basically, the idea is capture as much rainwater wherever it falls, for which you have to do a lot of soil and water conservation works, vegetative measures, water harvesting structures, and more importantly, we realize that the way you practice agriculture has a key bearing on availability of natural resources, on their productivity and their sustainability. We have found that when you do it this way, where you integrate natural resources management, where you bring in agriculture that is nature positive or nature neutral at least, and when you adopt technologies that increase factor use productivity, then and combining it with, of course, market access and logistics, we notice that the impact on the overall quality of life of the community that practices agriculture is enormous, and it's long lasting. Some of our projects that we have done with NABARD and with other donors, notably under the Indo-German Watershed Development Program, we closed them down 20 years ago because it started up in the 90s. And even today, the people are still benefiting from those environmental flows and services that were the result of the watershed work undertaken. So good agriculture is an outcome of good natural resources management. As we said, agriculture is part of the solution to climate change, as Dr. Murthy said there. It's absolutely true. In fact, agriculture contributes something like 20% of the greenhouse gases, but it also has the potential to also mitigate the impacts of climate change as well as promote adaptive capacities in the communities living in these areas. The other thing is, and I find a huge development and shift that is taking place, is in the nature of technologies that are evolving, particularly which is IT enabled. So you have the application of the Internet of Things, the IoT, artificial intelligence and machine-led advisories being generated and analytics being used to make agriculture and crop management decisions. Then also the use of mobile-based apps, the use of remote sensing and drones, and a huge improvement in both the logistics and financial services ecosystems. You see, I believe that this huge explosion of IT-enabled technologies is actually democratizing agriculture. and now gradually transferring the power of innovation down to the smallholder farmer. You see, the big problem with agriculture in developing countries is as much as 85% of the land, or rather the farming community, is smallholder farmers. Where in India, it's today about 1 hectare per farming household, which is nothing, you know. And if you're in a dryland farmer, 1 hectare can barely keep your soul together, body and soul together, unless you bring in technologies, new ways of organizing and implementing things, and new ways of integrating into the value chains. Now, for instance, in water, we developed, with climate change, with unpredictable weather patterns, as well as market volatility, the farmer had to have information in real time of how to respond to emergent weather conditions, both hydrometeorological and how to respond to market volatility. So we've developed an app called Farm Precise, FARMPRECIC, which is available in the Google Play Store, and it's free for the farmer. And that app actually seeks to customize crop weather advisories down to the farm situation of the farmer. That means it's not generic, it's not push-driven, it's pull-driven, and it's customized and tailored to provide advisories to the farmer in the light of emergent weather conditions. It also provides, and so it across the various sectors of crop management, which is irrigation, nutrient management, package of practices, cultural practices, and pest and disease management. You see, this, if the farmer, all the farmer has to do is to locate himself, georeference himself, put into the system what crop he's growing, variety, and the date of sowing, and in theory, and actually also to a fair extent in practice, the system or the app will then give him advisories customized to his particular situation, not general. And going forward, of course, we are going to be integrating image recognition software into this, so that for pest and disease management, where the farmer just takes a photograph of it and the system could then advise him on what is the nature of the pest and what are the possible control mechanisms he could use. So these kind of technology developments, and they're going to get better as we move into 5G, where you'll actually be able to help the small farmer to take advantage of this whole new science and technology of precision farming. Till now, precision farming has largely been the domain of the big farmer or the well-endowed farmer. It was beyond the ken and scope of the small farmer. But now, with miniaturization, actually, and higher granularity of technology, which has now become a mass product, basically, the small farmer has a real fair chance of not only doing agriculture that can be highly productive and raises incomes, but also doing it in a way that the environment in which he practices agriculture, naturally the ecosystem in which he lives, the landscapes, the watersheds in which he lives, and nature there is also safe and conserved and protected and handed over to the next generation, rather than leaving behind deserts. See, I think these are the two major changes which I feel hold enormous potential and promise to addressing smallholder farming in developing countries. The third development, which Dr. Murthy also alluded to, is this whole, what in India we call farmer producer companies, and elsewhere would be also farmer-led cooperative societies or companies. I believe that's a very potentially revolutionary way of social organization and commercial organization of farmers, particularly the small farmers. We'll come to that later in the other question that you have. I'm just flagging this issue that until the farmer gets a greater share in the end price the consumer pays in the market, in other words, a greater share in the value chain, we're not going to be able to make farming an attractive proposition for its children or raise incomes to the extent that farming is seen as an alternative livelihood and vocation. But we'll come to that later. On balance, I think agriculture has a lot of promise, not only to solve problems, but also to lead the revolution for increased welfare and reduction of poverty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Crispino. I think all the work that you've been doing was demonstrated with the passion that you were talking about, these issues. And I think you've made some very important and impactful points in terms of the shifts that we are seeing, and why and how agri depends on ecosystems, and how we need to have a conserve, a protect kind of an approach, rather than cutting the branch that one stands on. I think I like that example that you put out. And this whole thing about water, I think we all are working on this to understand the importance of how water references to the other developmental parameters and how it elevates all the other parameters. I think that's a very important point. We saw way back yeah, especially in India, how ITCs, e-Chopal, the procurement services that they started off with, kick-started at that point of time to what we're seeing today as to how IoT, AI or ML are being used to give real-time weather data. And, you know, I didn't know that you were doing a customized solution. I think that's really great. And we'll come back to you with some more questions. So thank you very much. And I would like to move on to Khadijah. Khadijah, Agrobank has been actively involved in charting the growth and the development of Malaysia's agriculture industry, and it has been offering Sharia compliant products, solutions across various customer segments, including corporate, commercial, consumer, trade finance, and microfinancing. As a DFI with a mandate in the agri sector, how has Agrobank provided financing facilities and programs for these agro communities, particularly for smallhold farmers and lower income earners? So over to you, Khadijah.
Okay, first of all, let me introduce a little bit of introduction of Agrobank. Agrobank was established, I think, more than 50 years ago, way back in 1969. So when it was first established, it was supposed to support the government's initiative to improve food security, especially with regards to the self-sufficiency level of rice. So we came in, we were established to support the farmers. So naturally, even the establishment of the DFIs to support the farmers, when we talk about paddy farmers, then most of them are actually the smallholders, right? The small size farmers. So that was then. And then part of our mandate is also because we are only owned by the government. So our role is also to distribute the funds, the government funds. Yeah? All the government funds will be channeled through Agrobank for agriculture purposes. But another mandate also is to uplift the well-being of the community in the agriculture sector. So not necessarily just those who are in the agriculture activities, or even those in the agriculture community or in the agriculture areas. Yeah, then of course, being a bank, we do provide financing services, like not just other financial services. I mean, not just financing. We do provide other products too, right? Like takaful or insurance in the terms of conventional banking, deposit, as well as financing I mentioned already. Yeah, so all in all, our target customers are actually the unserved and underserved. Because when somebody mentioned just now that how do we encourage, how do we get financing? How does the agriculture community get the financing? How do we match the risk? Because most of the time it's not within the appetite of the commercial banks, right? So that's what we call most of the customer segment would fall under the unserved and underserved as well. Yeah. So then what does it mean? Then our customer segments will cover the SMEs or the micro customers. Then of course the B40 groups and the women and the youth. Then of course we also provide financing to the people with disability. So these are the minority groups, yeah, in these sectors as well. Our role is actually to nurture and improve their bankability. So maybe they won't be able to go to the commercial banks directly. So they need to come to us. We have to provide the assistance. So in terms of risk appetite, our risk appetite would be different from the commercial banks. So somebody mentioned just now, also it was mentioned, then how can we make the impact? Yes, our balance sheet may be small, but then we focus on the sectors or subsectors which do not get much attention. For instance, if I can put our exposure to the fishery sectors, our exposure alone in Agrobank exceeds the whole industry exposure actually. Yeah, it's more than, I think the industry is about 300 over million, the whole industry. But then for Agrobank alone, we actually, our exposure to the sector is even more than the whole industry of 300 million. So if you combine the two, our market share is about 51%. So I think the impact is there. Although we're small, but what matters is the focus. Yeah, which area that we focus on. So when we talk about what kind of financing programs or how do we reach out to our customers, then of course, unlike commercial banks, most of our branches are actually in the rural areas where the agriculture activities are. or where the communities are. So that is number one in terms of the outreach. And we do not have, and we actually have many formats of our branches to reach out to our customers as well. Yeah. And we try to be present in the areas where no commercial banks are, and we try to be close to the community itself. Yeah. And then when in terms of the programs, we will engage with the anchor company, normally an established anchor companies, for examples for paddy production, for instance. Yeah. We work with one of the largest company in the country, where we will give financing to the smallholders, to the small farmers, and this established company will actually provide the technical assistance. So when they sell, the farmers, the produce will actually be sold back to this company. So then we will get the payment from the purchasers actually, and any profits made by the farmers will be given back to the customer. So in this instance also, the farmers will have the advantage or the benefits of getting enough financing. And we are actually one of the agencies under the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Industry. So at the ministerial level, we have actually embarked on one initiative where we call the smart, the large scale smart, I think, the smart, what is called, it's called in Malay the smart SSBB, they call it, yeah, the large scale farming. This is also for the paddy farmers, where they work with few other private companies, and the farmers will have the advantage of the guidance how to improve the yield. And even for the first cycle of the harvest, success has been shown. Actually, this is a successful result there. So again, our role is to come in and provide the financing. So, and as we are also one of the agencies under what we call Murthy, the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Industry, and we work closely with the agency which actually takes care of the fishery industry. So where they will grant the funds, then we will distribute. And one of the purposes is also to help to preserve the life below the water, which is aligned with the SDG, one of the SDG initiatives, right? So we encourage them to go deeper to the sea, and the financing will be made available through us. So that's in terms of financing again. Then when we talk about the marginalized group, for instance, women, we have a special product for the women for financing products. So mainly, of course, for the micro businesses. And financing is one of the important aspects of this financial discipline, but they also need to know how to save. So to inculcate that habit, we also have products for saving, not just for financing, specifically for women and also for the family members. So women is an important leader in the family too, so they can influence the financial discipline within the household itself. Yeah, so that is one. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been focusing on giving out the stimulus funds that have been granted by the government to the people. So I think for since close to 2 years now, we have been disbursing more than 1.4 billion. Primarily to the micro customers as well as to the SMEs, yeah. And this is on top of the restructuring exercise or the moratorium exercise, where we help to defer the payment due to the banks, yeah. And I think during this period also we have been very flexible in terms of helping our customers to manage their businesses. And on top of that, not just financing. Throughout this challenging period, we engage with our customers by having webinar sessions, yeah, and then we group them together and we let them learn from each other as well, how to manage or how to cope in the challenging environment. So that is part of the roles that we play. And what is interesting actually, when we talk about financing, we don't simply focus on the financing for the agriculture activities alone. like I mentioned earlier, we one of the mandates is actually to uplift the well-being of the community. So we do have products for home financing, but ours is slightly different from what has been offered in the market because our focus is more on the agriculture community in the agriculture area. So it's not really a large scale like the commercial banks, but we work with our business partners to identify the areas and then the community as well. So that is something that we do different from the commercial banks, and we focus on the specific areas. And we do not only focus on the primary agriculture sectors, but we focus throughout the value chain as well. Yeah, so that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Khadijah. Indeed, finance is a very, very important, catalyst as far as livelihoods and upliftment of societies are concerned. And you very eloquently mentioned, highlighted how improving bankability with feet on the street kind of an approach, where you are, where no commercial banks are, and that has enhanced the overall outreach. Risks, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the most important areas for any banker, and hedging your risks by financing through large companies to the farmers. I think in a way you're mitigating your own risks, which is and making the capital available. I think that is a very important role that the DFI is playing, and differentiated products. Beyond agri, where home finance or for that matter saving kind of products, which is also increasing the overall inclusiveness of the financial literacy of women. I think that's a very important thing. So DFIs do operate as commercial banks, but naturally they have a developmental agenda, and I think you've shown as to how Agrobank has been doing that. So great, and I will come back to you with some more questions. I will go to Mr. Murthy here. Mr. Murthy, we saw in what Crispino spoke and what you spoke earlier on, that research is proving to be increasingly important to cater to the overall climate objectives, right? Your last slide spoke about adaptation and climate change being, adaptation being very, very important. What in your view then, how do you think then DFIs should come forward to collaborate with agricultural experts? Because we need all kinds of stakeholders, right, to be able to drive the agri-biotech narrative forward, because that is also emerging as one of the very important areas. So what are your views on this? Thank you. Mr. Murthy, you're muted. You're on mute. Mr. Murthy, you're on mute.
It's a very good question. See, the DFS, we exist in the system. We are in the continuum. We are in a close touch with the series of stakeholders. As I said, that research is required. The reason is this: now, unlike other yesteryear's research, now we require a quick, rapid release of varieties, especially climate resilient varieties, and a pretty challenging one. You require a 2N variety. You require a simultaneous variety which is flood tolerant, drought tolerant. This is kind of a challenges. And once the variety release committee releases variety to the system, then probably where we pick up the threads. As I said earlier, watersheds. They're all our experimental labs. People are there, connects are there, communities are there, partners are there, where we would take out and pilot it. Look, they are the kind of experiences we have in our project areas. So that's how we maintain a continuum with the research institutes. Absolutely is required. Sense of urgency is there in stepping up the scientific efforts, research efforts to release the varieties which are suited to different biotech stresses in the different ecological regions in India. We strongly believe this. We take this.
Thank you. I think that is a quick, rapid solutions. I think that is the narrative that we need for these times. To be able to be more adaptive to climate change. Thank you. So, Crispino, I have a question for you, and this is what we've seen is, and I'm linking this to what Mr. Murthy has also said in terms of research and what we need to see. Most projects around agri-biotech are backed by grant-based financing. We need, so grant-based financing, while it's good and it provides the initial thrust to a particular sector, I think what we need is commercial finance. So what, in your opinion, are some of the successful models that you've seen, maybe you've piloted, that can potentially seek commercial finance and go to scale?
Yes, I will answer it in three levels of response. And then I'll also come back to the issue of research and agriculture development. I believe that the agriculture, like any other sector, notably the industrial sector, requires blended financing. Like, for instance, if you talk of improving industry, I mean, industry cannot function unless some of the basics are in place. Road connectivity, for instance, electricity, law and order, logistics, and all these have got externalities. So obviously, a country invests in them by way of grant. Industry is not expected to pay for basic development of infrastructure, because of externalities. And the commercial part of industrial development is when the banks come in with loans, etc. In agriculture, the infrastructure to make agriculture sustainable is what you call land and water management, or ecosystems regeneration conservation, which is for watershed development, for instance, and the management of natural resources. Now, without investments in this basic infrastructure, you will not really have productive and sustainable agriculture. You cannot expect the farmer to pay for this, because these investments, these infrastructure have externalities. That means those who don't invest in it, do not contribute to having it, also benefit from it. Like, for instance, if I improve the upper catchment of a river system, the benefits of that also go down to people right downstream who have never contributed to those conservation efforts. So then you have transfer arrangements called payment for ecosystem services, etc. But the point is, these kind of investments a country must be willing to put in by way of grant. The commercial aspect comes from the productivity enhancement component. Like, for instance, how do I use water more productively? How do I use seeds and cultural practices or cultivation practices that enhance productivity? How do you embed knowledge, technology into my operations? This can be certainly commercialized. And it's not rocket science, because wherever you have found agriculture being productive and farmers earning more, they don't ask for handouts. They are willing to take loans. And NABARD would easily testify to that. They've done an enormous amount of work in this respect. Farmers do not want handouts. They want the possibility to succeed. And what the national infrastructure and system should do is to accompany them toward that transition and move, and make available finance when required to the extent required. Okay, so this is my plea for blended financing, while also taking care of infrastructure that makes it possible. The other thing is, if you notice, wherever robust value chains have developed, and wherever farmers have been part of that value chain, maybe in different degrees, you find operations largely being funded commercially. Okay, and this is because when you have robust value chains in which the main producer is also able to capture a greater share of the surplus or the value, then automatically these matters become commercially viable. These processes become commercially viable. So take, for instance, the dairy industry in India. I mean, we are the largest producer of milk in the world, which wasn't the case a few decades ago. And that is because we developed the entire value chain from the village where the cow was milked right down to the end consumer, and the entire value addition in between. And it was also largely driven by cooperatives. So it's not enough that you develop a commercially viable value chain. You need to also get the primary producer as part of that value chain, which brings me to the third point, is unless there is a greater capture of the end price the consumer pays across the various avatars of formation of a particular product, unless the farmer or the primary producer gets a big share of that. For instance, in the cooperative dairy sector, I'm told it's as much as 60 to 70% of the end product, that is the outcome of the efforts, goes to the farmer, as opposed to agriculture in the United States, for instance, and even in India, smallholder farmer, where they get at most 8% of the end price to at most 10 to 15%. So unless these two things happen, in development of a robust value chain, value addition in which the farmer participates as well as a greater share of the end product or end value, you're not really going to be able to have commercial financing which is on a growing level. Okay. The last thing is, take for instance, green, and there's another point. You see, the green revolution in India, very few decades ago, hunger and shortage of food was a normal thing in India many decades ago. And then the government launched the green revolution and it transformed everything. Today, last year, our grain production itself was about 307 million tons, you see, and we are estimated that in another few years' time, we will require something like 345 million tons to feed our population. I think with the way things are going, we're going to meet that. But what made the difference? Political will and government support. You see, we were faced with a crisis and then we buried our differences, pulled in our resources, got the government backed it, and voila, where we are today. So if you want agriculture to succeed, you need political will and the government behind it, okay, as an enabler and as a facilitator. Okay? Now with regard to research, you see the logo behind me there is WOTR, which is the mother institution water, and below that is WCRES, which is the Water Center for Resilience Studies. See, way back in 2007, we realized that climate change is really befuddling our efforts, really damaging agriculture and affecting communities that once were successful. And we realized that unless you do basic research in terms of an applied nature, not fundamental research, but in which the villagers or the people themselves, with government departments, public institutions, and other institutions, unless we did it as a collaborative effort, wherein the people who are affected are part of the analysis and the solution, we would not be able to really make a difference. So when we do transdisciplinary research in a collaborative partnership way, involving the target group that you would like to benefit, then two things happen. The problems they face or the crisis being confronted is understood by those who are affected. So there is a commonality of understanding, which is very essential if you want to acquire or achieve a consensus of what to do about it, right? Because unless we understand why, we're not going to know how to cope with it. And that is not enough that you and I know how to cope with it. What is important is those with the resources who can make that difference, all right, including government, should be part of both the problems analysis as well as its solution. So unless you get together people who can make a difference, including the target group, to solve the problem, you won't be able to have sustained outcomes. That's why applied research is growing in importance. If you're going to really, it has to grow in importance and is growing if it's going to make a contribution to improving agriculture and integrating technology in the entire ecosystems evolving around agriculture. Thank you.
Thanks, Crispino. Blended finance has been one of the models that, we've also, I've also effectively deployed. And I think, we need more and more, banks to come forward to, put out products which will enable, the overall deployment of capital that you just spoke about. And of course, very important point on the robust value chains. Dairy sector has been able to, improve payment cycles and better share of, the value that you put out. And that's been one sector whose example can be emulated in other sectors, undoubtedly. And the green revolution, the political will and the government support, I think that is extremely important, which works as an enabler and facilitator. So thanks for those comments. And if I may go to Khadijah now, Khadijah, my question to you is that, at COP26, there was this major announcement which was made around the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, which is a global coalition with over 450 financial firms, who hold, whose balance sheets are about $150 trillion across 45 countries, which are aligning their financial activities to achieving net zero emissions by 2050. And within this space, there are DFIs which play a critical role in ensuring these pledges like these and many more that were taken at COP, they are really, materialized, and DFIs can play that role of a catalyst. So how do you think, DFIs, especially sitting in the global south, can create more incentives to mobilize private capital towards fueling, agri-tech, biotech kind of businesses, given that you mentioned earlier on that you've got a lot of partners on board. So how do you see the role emerging for DFIs? Over to you.
Thank you. I will say it from the context of Malaysia. From the context of Malaysia, the government has introduced few tax incentives, of course, yeah, for these purposes. But for us in Agrobank, coincidentally, this year is the starting of our new strategic business plan. And we have also come up with our new vision, which we say we want to advance agriculture beyond banking. So we want to do more than just the traditional role of a bank. So as you may be aware, in Malaysia, we still do not have the crop takaful. So Agrobank is actually arranging for the first one in the country. So we know that agriculture is a high risk industry. If there's no form of protection, then it will not attract many people to the industry, right? So first thing first, if you want to attract partners or investors, then we need to have this crop takaful. So it is in our business plan, actually. Hopefully in the next 12 to 24 months, we can realize this, but it is in the pipeline. So that is actually one of the important factors as well. So another new business model that we want to introduce is actually what you meant beyond banking. We want to introduce investment platforms. Yeah, I think just now Crispino mentioned about blending funding, financing. Yeah, but to me, if I can borrow that term, what we say about blended funding, maybe we can blend financing and investment. Yeah, we have to invite the investors as well. So what we learned from COVID-19 pandemic, many actually suffered because of over-dependent on financing. But things may be different if we have investors in the venture as well, right? So we think that moving forward, in order to make the industry more attractive, then we should open it up for everyone, make it accessible for the interested investors to come in. So because as mentioned by Dr. Murthy just now, agriculture is actually the solution. So we can invite those who are very passionate about this climate change or about green economy. They can actually participate by working with us, right? So, and that is actually, I think that's how we strategize moving forward when it comes to what more we can do beyond banking. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Khadijah. I think beyond banking, that's one message for bankers, and there's a lot of opportunity that is sitting there to be exploited. So that's a very interesting point. And I would like to go to Mr. Murthy. There's a question.
Would I like to? I would like to come in. Would you please?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Since a very interesting debate is happening, we are talking about credit. There is one more element which is coming in is the credit enhancement, credit guarantees.
Yeah.
That is the thing which is coming in almost. If you look at the Government of India schemes, maybe it's Malaysia, all the day-based now leveraging credit enhancements, credit guarantees. To lend this risky sectors or in terms of agriculture, FPOs. So that is hugely coming in. In India, we have credit guarantee system is there. That is the point. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry to.
Yeah, no, you've made a very important point. I think we need more and more such kind of products which are, because ultimately, if you want the private sector to come in, private sector would need some kind of guarantees, given that they have their objectives are a little different, right? I mean, they're looking at returns, they're looking at, the risks that are involved. And that serves as one of the big deterrents for private sector. So I think with robust credit enhancements, as you said, or even blended finance models, we've seen even in issuances of green bonds, how credit enhancements really bring in the right kind of investors to be able to invest in those products. So I think that's a very important point that you've made. Mr. Murthy, I would like to go to you. There's an audience question that I would like to address to you. And that is that the question is that looking ahead, the core question is whether today's agriculture and food systems are capable of meeting the needs of a global population that is projected to reach about 9 billion by the mid-century and peak at 11 billion by the end of the century. So can we achieve the required production increases even as the pressures on already scarce land and water resources and the negative impacts of climate change intensify? So what do you think? So how do we feed the 11 billion people? That's really the question, with the pressures, the negative impacts of climate change. That's the question.
Yes, that is a biggest challenge. The very fundamental reason is this: the productivities have been reached a plateau. Then we can't keep on expand the area under crops. Plus coupled with climate change. So food production, yes, indeed, the 2030 or 2050 indeed is very challenging. Coupled with the kind of degradation happening in the natural resource sector, indeed it is a challenging sector. But one more dimension I would like to add to this debate, to this very question is, in case of India, I look at presently we are comfortable, as Crispino said, that we are reached a comfortable food production stage. But on the other hand, we look at the nutrition side. India, we are not really faring well on the nutrition side. There are a lot of indicators on the downside. SDGs scores on this aspect also. So the question is this: food shift in from food grain, cereal centric, which is moving on to the nutritional side. That is where a real challenge lies now, coupled with this climate change induced problems in the basic agriculture side. So that is where we need to address it. I think one good thing is happening is this: science, plant breeding techniques. They're all well set, tuned. For example, you can breed quality parameters in the varieties, vitamin A, so on and so forth, iron rich, zinc rich, so on and so forth. It's we can do through breeding methods, which have already been said in my presentation. So productivity enhancement, I think technology, the biotechnology route, that which I said it, unless the technologies comes in and speed up the productivity varieties which have multiple traits, then probably would going to address this issue. This is my take. Thank you.
Thank you. I think nutrition and quality of production is the question here. Crispino, my question to you is that you mentioned about WOTR's Center for Resilience Studies and the TNG research, where a committee of experts from government, scientists, and practitioners have engaged. I think what is important is EBA that's emerging, ecosystem-based adaptation as an approach that can both contribute to reducing the vulnerabilities at the local level and be able to provide a kind of a sustainable approach to the whole challenge that we are facing. How, in your opinion, can then biotechnology emerge with ecosystem-based approaches for agriculture and food sustainability, and also take the nutrition point that Mr. Murthy had made into account, please? Your response, Crispino.
Yeah, thank you, Namita. You see, the way forward is collaboration and multi-stakeholder engagement. Otherwise, we will not be able to address the challenges and complexities that we are facing. See, for instance, as Mr. Murthy said, we have solved the problem of food security, but we are far from achieving nutrition security. And that's quite correct. That's a problem also that is plaguing large parts of the world. But if government, if research institutions, if banks, if industry, and NGOs, civil society come together to address this, I think it's possible. Because what's making it possible is technology. It has democratized solutions as well as offered us powerful tools to address problems collectively and independent of space and time, which we didn't have the luxury before. You see, with the internet, we are talking, we are far apart, all of us are far away, and it's as if we are right in the same room. And this is hugely transformative, both cognitively as well as in terms of resource deployment. That's one. So we have launched, that is WCRES and WOTR have launched together with a number of partners, both in the government sector as well as private sector, as well as the financial sector. One of those partners is Octus ESG, Namita Vikas thing. They have launched this platform collective called EcoBari. EcoBari is actually a collaborative for ecosystem-based adaptation for resilient incomes. You see, unless conservation also yields to tangible incomes or benefits to local communities, they're not going to be a major stakeholder in that. And nothing you do then can be sustainable. So EcoBari is one such platform which has the ambition to bring together disparate actors, but all stakeholders, to address the simple problem of how do we conserve our biodiversity, nature, and ecosystems, while also increasing productivity and including people in that development so that they earn higher incomes as well as a better quality of life. So this is one way forward. The other thing is, look, we have to explore and be quite bold about, just as in the venture capital and startup world, they've adopted new ways of investment and organization. We have to explore that in agriculture. I know it's fraught with a lot of political uncertainties, but I guess we are now facing a wall, and sooner or later we will have to do it. So either we do it in a planned way, or we do it in an unplanned way, which has its own disastrous consequences. And so, for example, it's not with some hesitation that I'm going to say this, but I'd like to qualify it before I fully say it. Unless we corporatize agriculture, okay, which is in a way that is professionally run, but where the stakeholders are the farmers themselves and not gentlemen investors like you and me who invest in the share market, where the stakeholders as well as investors and shareholders are the farmers themselves. I'm not very sure we would be able to leverage the benefits of economies of scale, or to take advantage of technologies in a way that can yield greater returns to the farmers. In other words, make agriculture an industry where the shareholders are the farmers themselves, adopt technology which will compete with the best that an industrial world or industrial scale production can do, and a social organization or governance structure that will apportion a greater share of the profits or surpluses to the farmers, to the primary producers themselves. I think unless we really do this, agriculture will always be seen as the elephant in the room, as the one which only takes money and doesn't return, though even that's a fallacy. Even that's a fallacy, actually, if you look at it carefully. Agriculture has got actually a bad name for no reason. You see, we won't get into that debate again. And the other thing is, climate change, for instance, and this, of course, we are talking to the converted anyway. We're all agriculture pro people, you see. But apart from that, yes, climate change and particularly COP. For the first time, a COP thing has talked of adaptation as an element towards mitigation. And that opens up huge financing, as we need to really, and more money will come, and that's a good thing. So carbon financing, if we can make agriculture a carbon sink, okay, which is also very good for its own productivity, and wherein the benefits of carbon financing go to the farmer, be it either as credit transfers or whatever, I think we can blend these two, both nature and money together, where the money really lies with the farmers, you see. And I believe that undergirding this is knowledge, learning, and dissemination of the same, for which the days when the teacher taught and the student learned and repeated are gone. The teacher and the student must now sit on the same table and talk to each other of their strengths and ignorances so that one learns from the other. Then there will be co-ownership of what needs to be done. So greater collaboration, more platforms like EcoBari, for instance, or greater development of such platforms, I believe is the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you made some very interesting points on leveraging technology, tangibility, which is very, very important. And then how do you, if I may say, how do you monetize the whole agriculture space in terms of carbon sinks or credits? I think that is a very attractive proposition where they could exchange the carbon credits for real credit or something like that. I think that those kind of pathways would then get more of adaptation finance to the sector. So thanks a lot. I think that's a very interesting point. Khadijah, we have a question from the audience for you, and that is Agrobank as a DFI, which has been mandated by the government to provide financing for farmers to sustain the food security in Malaysia. So do you think government should invest more on the development of biotechnology, especially in the agri sector? So that's an audience question for you, Khadijah.
Thank you. Actually, the government is doing that because when we're talking about agri biotech, in general, actually, the bank is the government actually has introduced grants or even has channeled funds to encourage adoption of technology in the agriculture space, simply because we need to improve the sufficiency level as well as the nutrition level, like what Dr. Murthy mentioned just now. So both. So yes, the government has been doing that actually, and we are aligning our strategy with the policy that has been developed by the government. And recently, also this year, the government has actually launched this policy for food security, and the government has also launched the 12th Malaysian plan, and lots have been mentioned and references have been made on adoption of technology to improve the agriculture sector. So yes, the answer yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving those understandings to the question. So there's one question which is coming from the audience that any panelist may answer it. It's talking about the emerging field in biotechnology. What are your views on cellular agriculture? Example is lab-grown meat. And lab-grown meat has huge environmental potential, but is it, I mean, how sustainable is it in your opinion? And is it being pushed and promoted across Southeast Asia? So any of the panelists could take that question. Yes, Mr.
Murthy. Many such examples are there, but I'll put a banker's perspective on this. Yes, many things are possible from the science. Science is immense opportunities are available. But when the science converts into then we get into the financial viability side, plus regulatory side, these two things. I think these two things had to emerge. They're at a nascent stage. Probably it will take some more time to see the final picture of the sector as a whole. I mean, the emerging new products as a whole. It's too early to move on to that. Thank you.
Khadijah, do you also want to answer that?
Me? Okay. I think
supplement.
Yeah, I think in my view, it is possible, because when we are talking about growing population, we need to find alternative, right? So like in Malaysia, then we say we want to grow the self-sufficient level of the rice from 71 to 75%. But then we also think maybe because of the changing lifestyle, people may not need to eat rice that much moving forward, right? Maybe we have to find alternative. Then as more and more people are passionate about this ESG, about not killing the animals, and so make sure that we continue to be green. So we have to find the alternative. So I think the popularity is actually increasing, as we can see. Actually, more and more research is being done. So it is possible then, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to go with one last final rapid fire question to all the three. Yeah, sorry, Crispino, do you want to add something?
Yes, just a quick response to the same question. Is two responses. One is, of course, it is driven by the concern to reduce the environmental footprint of the various food products we eat. So, to raise 1 kilo of rice, you may require 15,000 liters of water or something like that, whatever, and much more for meat. So the reason why we have gone into this lab and industry-produced kind of things is to offset this. So, but unless we do, I think the technology is still in the nascent phase and it's getting better, but this full cost of producing that is still to be understood. In other words, once we do a full life cycle analysis of that product, we would be in a better position to see whether it really is better than the current use or current situation. Number one. Number two, it ultimately depends on consumer preferences. So it will succeed or fail depend on how it has tickled the palate of people and how they feel it is in line with their beliefs or their cultural background. See? This basically is what I want to say.
I think that's very, very important. So I want to go to each of the panelists with a rapid fire kind of a question. So you please give me your answers in a minute. We spoke a lot about technology. I want to bring in the human element here. And, we've seen how DFIs, other multilateral banks, NGOs are playing an important role in the whole agri sector. Having said that, the upskilling and the upscaling of agri sector, agri biotechnology, given its overall contribution to the GDP, it's a very important space. What measures, very quickly, do you think, what interventions, for that matter, need to be taken towards upskilling and upscaling of this entire space and sector? So we could go with Khadijah first, and then Crispino, and then Mr. Murthy. So Khadijah, over to you.
Okay,
very
thank
quickly.
you. Very quickly. I think that we need the answer to that question is actually the youth participation. We need to increase the youth participation in the industry, because the appetite on adoption of technology is much better, I think, compared to those who are in the advanced age.
Okay, that's good. Crispino?
I think we need to make farming income-wise attractive. Unless farmers get remunerative returns, their children are not going to continue with farming, and there is no incentive to invest further in agriculture. So government, in my opinion, should not only launch, should increase capital formation in agriculture, invest more in upskilling the skills of farmers, improve and develop the ecosystem, both financial, logistics, as well as nature, in which agriculture can thrive and return benefits to the farmers. So it's an all of government, it's an all of society, it's an all of technology and knowledge approach. It has to be brought together in a collaborative format.
Yes, I fully agree. Thank you. Mr. Murthy?
Yeah, I believe you rightly flagged behavioral change. Communication is the thing which is required to bring this technology to dispel fears about biotechnology. So we need to educate, we need to bring campaigns, awareness creation to bring the science and technology to the farmers. That's where I flag it for upskilling and upskilling. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I think this was a very, very, interesting discussion with insights, on multiple aspects of, how do you look at the sector? How do you look at the financing? What are institutions doing? And of course, how do you bring in more scale and more power with finance to the sector? I think what I caught on when Mr. Murthy was doing his presentation was, his tagline, which said that if villages progress, countries progress. I think that's a very important message for everybody, financiers as well as those who are delivering interventions on ground. I'm sure all the members of the audience found this interesting, this discussion to be very interesting and a huge learning for me personally, in terms of how do you promote biotechnology in agriculture, specifically in emerging markets. How do you get finance mobilized for this particular purpose? And I think it taught us a lot. And thank you very much, Mr. Murthy, Crispino, Khadijah, for being with us today. And thanks a lot. And I'm sure the ADFIM is also grateful for you to have participated in this. And we'll hear more from you, I'm sure, in the near future. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.